In this video, I'm going to be providing one scorching hot take, one bold prediction for every team in the NFL. Let's go ahead and dive right into it here. Starting with the NFC North, we have the Chicago Bears. I think Jaquan Brisker is going to be considered a top 10 safety in the NFL by the end of the year. He's had some really good games throughout his rookie season. I thought he showed some really nice flashes. He was able to get up in the box, get some sacks, force some turnovers. I think that he showed some great traits. And with a secondary in Chicago that I think is much improved this year, I do think Jaquan Brisker will take a huge step up in year two, and I do think that he may be considered a top 10 safety by the end of the year. Next, we have the Green Bay Packers. I'm going to go with Luke Musgrave, the rookie tight end out of Oregon State. I think he's going to be the third tight end ever to have 1,000 yards receiving as a rookie tight end. That's a mark that really hasn't been met much ever. Tight end is one of the hardest positions to develop. And I do think Musgrave is in a great opportunity to really make that happen. Jordan Love, he's a young quarterback. He's going to rely on his tight ends. He doesn't have elite wide receivers on the outside. Musgrave has created a lot of separation in the preseason. He has really good athleticism. I think, that separation is going to be big for gaining Jordan Love's trust. And I think Musgrave could be a great player for the Packers this year and have potentially over 1,000 yards as a rookie, as he has a clear role as that tight end one in the Packers offense. Next, the Minnesota Vikings. I think they're going to have two 1,000-yard receivers in Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison. I wasn't the hugest fan of Jordan Addison as a draft analyst, but I think he landed in a perfect situation. Justin Jefferson's going to draw a lot of double teams. He's going to be, the focal point of that defense, getting them to get stops. And I think Jordan Addison is really going to benefit. He is great at creating separation. He's a really smooth route runner. I think Kirk Cousins will appreciate somebody that gets a lot of separation and gets open a lot. Justin Jefferson's absolutely going to get over 1,000 yards, barring any unforeseen injury concerns. But I definitely think that there could be two 1,000-yard receivers in Minnesota in 2023. And then for the Detroit Lions, I'm going to go with Dan Campbell winning Coach of the Year. I think he's done a fantastic job turning around the culture in Detroit. I think Detroit gets their first playoff berth in a while, and I think Dan Campbell ultimately wins Coach of the Year for his work in changing the culture of Detroit, getting them back onto the road to success, and getting them into the playoffs, where I do think they could make some noise as well. Next, for the Philadelphia Eagles, I'm going to go with Devontae Smith having more yards than A.J. Brown. I do think this would be a pretty bold take. I love Devontae Smith. He's one of the best wide receiver twos in the NFL, but A.J. Brown had a monster year in year one in Philadelphia. I think Smith really kind of takes another step. Maybe defenses rotate a bit more of their coverages to A.J. Brown, and it just leaves Smith more open. Maybe A.J. Brown gets injured, but I do think that there's a decent chance that Devontae Smith is up there when it comes to the yardage totals, and I definitely think he could surpass what A.J. Brown does this year. I do think it could be some slight regression from Brown, but also another big step in Devontae Smith's development. Next up for the Dallas Cowboys, I think Micah Parsons wins Defensive Player of the Year and has over 18 sacks this year. He really hasn't topped 15 at all over the course of his career. Reportedly, he's going to be having more edge rush opportunities. I think he's been in the mix for that Defensive Player of the Year and for a few years now, and he's going to finally get it here, having an 18-plus sack season and really becoming one of the truly dominant edge rushers in the NFL. If he isn't already in that mix, I certainly think he is, but I think he gets that Defensive Player of the Year that has been eluding him for the past 2 years or so. I definitely think that he is going to be a force to be reckoned with for the Cowboys this year. Next, we have the Commanders. I think Chase Young perhaps stays healthy and has double-digit stacks, which leads to him being franchise tagged at the end of this year. Chase Young is an incredibly talented, incredibly athletic, powerful, fast defensive lineman that really, hasn't worked out for the Commanders like they'd hoped. He won Defensive Rookie of the Year in his rookie season, but really hasn't been able to stay healthy and be the same player ever since. I think he finally is able to stay healthy, really kind of develop into a really nice pass rusher. The Commanders, may have to franchise tag him in order to keep him around, as he is on an expiring contract, but I do think that finally he's able to stay healthy and really prove his worth as a top 5 pick in that really loaded 2020 NFL draft. Then for the last team in the NFC North, the New York Giants, I think this defensive line combines for over 50 sacks. I think Kayvon Thibodeau has a huge breakout year in year 2, has double-digit sacks. Dexter Lawrence has double-digit sacks as well. and this defensive line is just an absolute force to be reckoned with. Leonard Williams and Azeez Ojulari, all these guys are really talented players, and I think this Giants pass rush is really going to explode, and they will have over 50 sacks in 2023. Moving to the NFC South, starting with the Atlanta Falcons, not only do I think Bijan Robinson wins Offensive Rookie of the Year, I also think that he wins the rushing title. He has the most rushing yards of anybody in the league and is just a fantastic player. He's in the Offensive Player of the Year conversations as well. I definitely think Bijan's going to hit the ground running, and as a true rookie is going to smash rushing records and be just a truly dominant running back for the Falcons from day one and get that rushing title. Next, for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, I think Todd Bowles is the first head coach fired. I do think he gets fired likely by week 13 or so. After the Buccaneers really disappoint, Baker Mayfield gets benched, Kyle Trask comes in, he looks even worse. They go back to Baker Mayfield, things aren't working out, and Todd Bowles gets fired. But I do think that Todd Bowles being the first head coach to be fired is something that might happen for the Buccaneers in 2023. I just don't really believe on the path that they are on with Bowles at the helm. For the New Orleans Saints, many people consider them to be, the favorites in this division after acquiring Derek Carr. I think Dennis Allen loses his job as they go 7-10. They finish third in the division and they truly disappoint. I think that Allen really underperforms as the head coach and is fired, potentially one of the first head coaches to be fired as well. I just don't believe in the direction that Dennis Allen is taking this team. I just don't think he's a very good head coach, and I think that he gets fired by the end of the year as they have a very disappointing season. Then the Panthers. I'm going to go with Bryce Young making the Pro Bowl in his rookie season. This would definitely be a big accomplishment as rookie quarterbacks tend to struggle in their first year. I just think that Bryce Young has such a high floor. If his wide receivers can be half decent, which is a question because they are really bad, but I do think that Bryce Young has a chance to be a Pro Bowl level quarterback. In the NFC, which has some decent quarterbacks, you figure Jalen Hurts, Geno Smith, Dak Prescott, Justin Fields, would be in the mix, as well as Kirk Cousins. You figure they would be in the mix for the NFC Pro Bowl, but I think that Bryce Young gets the nod over one of them and is one of the 3 quarterbacks selected to go to the Pro Bowl in the NFC. Next up for the NFC West, I have the Seattle Seahawks. I think they make the NFC Championship game after they have a really nice run in the playoffs as a wild card team. I just really believe in Pete Carroll and the way that this team is built. You've got a 3-headed monster wide receiver. You've got some great running backs. I think the offensive line is improved. I like the coaching that they have there. The defense, especially on the back end and the secondary, is really impressive as well. So I think the Seahawks team is a team that can make some noise, especially in the NFC, which is really kind of up for grabs. I think the Seahawks could be a team that really is on the rise and they show their stuff in the playoffs, perhaps upsetting a 1 or a 2 seed and getting to the NFC Championship game. Next, we have the 49ers. I think that Sam Darnold will start for this team, towards the end of the regular season and for them in the playoffs as well. I think either Purdy is going to disappoint, perhaps not be fully healthy, and Sam Darnold's going to come in. He's always been a quarterback that has had the physical talent, and Kyle Shanahan is really able to get the most out of him. I think that he eventually becomes their starting quarterback and starts for them in the playoffs. As a team that's likely going to be a 1 or a 2 seed, a very high seed in the NFC, I think Sam Darnold will be leading the charge for them in 2023 come playoff time. Next, for the LA Rams, I think both Matthew Stafford and Sean McVay both retire and leave the LA Rams after 2023 after another disappointing season. Stafford, the injuries are really starting to pile up for him. He really hasn't been able to stay healthy. It doesn't look like he's the same quarterback that he was even just a few years ago, back when he won that Super Bowl. Sean McVay, I think, is just almost addicted to winning another losing season in the books when he has a lot of those broadcasting offers available to him. I think that he will go when Matthew Stafford goes. I think Stafford retires due to his injuries, due to his age, and then Sean McVay follows shortly after, and the Rams are looking for a new head coach and a new quarterback. Then finally, the Arizona Cardinals. I think Jonathan Gannon may be a one-and-done head coach. He gets fired, and the Arizona Cardinals bring in an offensive mind to work with Caleb Williams. Perhaps it would be Lincoln Riley. Perhaps it would be a college coach. They did get burned by Cliff Kingsbury, but I just wasn't overly inspired by the Gannon hiring. They really seem to be full-on tank mode. And if Caleb Williams is in their lap with the first overall pick, wouldn't surprise me if they give him all of the resources that he possibly needs to be successful, get him an offensive head coach and somebody that he can really build and develop a relationship with from day one. Wouldn't surprise me if Gannon is a one-and-done head coach and they move on from him and hire an offensive mind for Caleb Williams in 2024. Next, we have the AFC North, starting with the Cleveland Browns. I think DeJuan Jones finishes the year as the starting right tackle. Jack Conklin has been a solid piece for them, but whether it's due to injury or Jones just stepping in and being a better player, I think DeJuan Jones was a massive steal in the 4th round for the Browns. I really don't know why he fell that far. Maybe it was his size concerns, maybe it was attitude, maybe it was injuries, who knows? But DeJuan Jones was definitely a talent worthwhile of being a day 1 or 2 pick, and he fell all the way to the Browns in the 4th round. I think ultimately he overtakes Conklin as the right tackle of this team and is a huge piece for them moving forward. Next, the Ravens. I think Lamar Jackson has his best season ever passing, but I also think it's his worst season ever rushing. I think Greg Roman was a huge part of Lamar Jackson's rushing success. Not that he can't be an escape artist and, scramble and be a really good player for them, but I do think he leaned a lot more into the quarterback run game than Todd Monken is going to do. Monken really wants to have that more advanced passing concepts, and, there was a lot of faults with Greg Roman, but I do think he got a lot out of Lamar Jackson's legs. I think that may not be the case as much this year, but I do think Monken will get a bit more out of his arm. It will be his best year when it comes to passing statistics, but maybe the most disappointing when it comes to rushing in 2023. Next, we have the Pittsburgh Steelers. I think they lead the league in sacks in 2023. When TJ Watt's healthy, he is truly one of the best sack artists in the game. You also have Alex Highsmith, who's one of the best edge rusher 2s in the NFL. You also have some really nice pieces in Cam Hayward on the inside. Keanu Benton was a really interesting pick that I think has some juice rushing the passer as well. Herbig has been kind of the story of the preseason. Just his ability to bend around offensive tackles and really hit the quarterbacks has been truly impressive. That athleticism, bend, and skill has been really something to watch for the Steelers in the preseason. I think they all lead the charge and get this Steelers team to be the number 1 team in the NFL when it comes to sacks in 2023. For the Cincinnati Bengals, I think they finally get over the hump and they win the Super Bowl, their first in franchise history. I think that Joe Burrow is finally able to lead this team to the Super Bowl with a much improved offensive line, his great weapons at wide receiver. I think this is likely going to be, the tipping point where they may not be able to retain all of their pieces. They've got to start paying Burrow and some of these other players as well. This would really be the year to go on a run, and I think the Bengals absolutely have the talent to do so. 2 years in a row, they've made it to the AFC Championship game. 1 year, they made it to the Super Bowl. I think they finally get over that hump and win the Super Bowl in 2023. For the AFC East next, we have the Miami Dolphins. I think that Jalen Phillips truly emerges as an elite pass rusher and becomes one of those players that we talk about in the Defensive Player of the Year race. He really had an amazing second half of the year last year in 2022 and really showed some great flashes of becoming a truly elite edge rusher. The Dolphins also have some nice pieces. You've got Christian Wilkins, you've got Bradley Chubb, Zach Seiler. These guys will all, take blocking assignments away from Jalen Phillips, and I think that he may face some more one-on-ones than some of the elite level pass rushers in the NFL, and I do think he will absolutely feast on it. The former, first round pick for the Dolphins coming out of Miami, Florida. I think he really kind of elevates his game in year 3 and becomes a truly dominant edge rusher that is in that elite conversation for Defensive Player of the Year. For the Jets, I think Garrett Wilson wins Offensive Player of the Year in 2023. I definitely think that with Aaron Rodgers coming in, Rodgers likes to pepper his favorite targets. Garrett Wilson certainly seems to be one of those players. He's one of the guys that Rodgers just simply trusts, and Wilson was one of the more talented wide receiver prospects, in my opinion, coming out in the past 5 years. I just think the body control, the route running, his hands are just so good, and I definitely think that he's going to have a huge year in year 2 with consistent quarterback play. Like I said, Rodgers is going to pepper him with targets because he just trusts him, knows where he'll be, and I think Garrett Wilson will really benefit, put up huge numbers, and be in that Offensive Player of the Year race, and I think he takes it this year. For the New England Patriots, I think Bill Belichick retires at the end of the 2023 season after they missed the playoffs in a somewhat disappointing season. Belichick really isn't getting any younger. He's, tried to survive post-Brady and hasn't had a ton of success. I think this could possibly be the year that he decides to walk away after, an incredible run. pretty much inarguably one of the greatest coaches of all time, maybe the best. I do think that ultimately 2023 could be his last season, especially if things go south in New England, and it could be the final ride of the Bill Belichick era in New England. For the Buffalo Bills, I think Sean McDermott's seat gets pretty hot after they lose in the divisional round for another year in a row. I think that this is becoming something that has grown stale in Buffalo. They feel like they should be competing for Super Bowls. They failed to make it to the AFC Championship game. If that happens again with a really talented roster, you've got Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs and some great pieces all across this roster. The defense isn't getting any younger. I think that Sean McDermott really could be under some fire if they can't make it at least to the AFC Championship this year and really prove that they can compete for Super Bowls with him at the helm, because their window may be closing if they cannot get something going rather soon. And I think McDermott could be on the hot seat and potentially even fired if they really disappoint this year. For the Indianapolis Colts, I think Anthony Richardson eclipses 10 rushing touchdowns. Only Jalen Hurts met this mark in 2022. It is fairly rare for a quarterback to have 10 rushing touchdowns, but I think Richardson, not only is he going to get goal line carries because he's so big, so strong, so dynamic, I definitely think they'll run him on quarterback sneaks and quarterback powers down in the red zone, but he can absolutely break off a 60-yard touchdown run. He did it plenty of times at Florida. His speed, his size are just incredible in the open field, and I think Shane Steichen has proven he could really take advantage of a rushing quarterback like he did in Philadelphia. I definitely think Richardson is going to be in for a big year on the ground and have a ton of rushing scores in 2023. For the Jaguars, I think Calvin Ridley has over 1,400 yards and 8 touchdowns and really is a fantastic acquisition for the Jaguars. I think he will probably be in the top 5 or so in receiving yards. Him and Trevor Lawrence already seem to have a great connection between the two of them. He's one of the best route runners, best separators in the NFL, and I expect huge things from him in 2023. I definitely think that, any over bets, anything like that would be a great decision to go ahead. I definitely think he is in for a big year and somebody that could really explode in this Doug Peterson offense. For the Texans, I think that Tank Dell is going to be their leading receiver, have over 800 yards, 4 or 5 touchdowns in his rookie season, which would be really, really productive for a tiny slot receiver. I definitely think that, he is somewhat limited when it comes to his catch radius and his contested catch ability, but he is a true separator. He's really good when you get the ball in his hands. I do think for Stroud, he likes to see his wide receivers come open. He's used to his wide receivers getting a lot of separation at the college level. I'm not sure that many of the wide receivers on the Texans really have the ability to separate like Tank Dell does, and I expect him to be the leading receiver and have a huge year for them in 2023. Then for the Titans, I think Chig Okonkwo has a breakout year, is truly a fantastic piece for them, and I do think that he makes the Pro Bowl. And a AFC that has some great tight ends. You think of Travis Kelce, of Mark Andrews. There's some really nice tight ends in the AFC. I think he makes the Pro Bowl with all of those guys. And I definitely think that he's going to have a big year, regardless of how good this Titans team is. Treylon Burks, DeAndre Hopkins going to take, some coverages away from the middle of the field. I think Okonkwo could really benefit from that and have a huge year this year. Next for the Chiefs, I think they have a bottom 10 pass rush while Chris Jones sits out for the first half of the season. Then he comes back in the playoffs and is truly dominant. The Chiefs were one of the best teams in the NFL when it came to sacks last year, but a huge reason for that was just Chris Jones's pure dominance on the interior. I think they will miss having him if he does sit out. Obviously, he's one of the best interior players in the NFL, but I do think the line is a little bit, less impressive without him there. Karl Loftus, you obviously have Felix Anudike-Uzomah, some nice players, but I do think that they don't really have any true alpha without Chris Jones out there, and they could really kind of be neutralized pretty well, have a bottom 10 pass rush until Chris Jones comes back, whether that's, early on in the season or perhaps really late if he does decide to hold out, for the majority of the season. But I think he will be big when he comes back for them, perhaps in the playoffs. For the Chargers, I think Brandon Staley gets fired after they fail to make the playoffs. This is one of the most talented teams on paper without a doubt, but Brandon Staley, I just don't believe in him as a head coach. I think his defense really is not well coached. I think it's very squishy. I don't like the scheme, and he consistently is just not getting the most out of these players, whether it's, injuries, which aren't necessarily his fault, or keeping, bad coaches around, not being able to instill a culture of winning and confidence, whatever it is. I just don't think that Brandon Staley is a good head coach, and I just don't think that this Chargers team in a loaded AFC is going to be able to sneak into the playoffs. And even if they do, I think Staley could be on the hot seat with Justin Herbert, a top 5 or 6 quarterback in the NFL. This team should be competing for Super Bowls. They may miss the playoffs, and I think Brandon Staley loses his job because of it. For the Broncos up next, I think the Broncos as a whole look much better, but Russell Wilson still looks broken even with Sean Payton coming in. I was kind of hesitant of Russell Wilson last year. I do think he was showing his age a bit. Just a lot of the things that make him a special quarterback in Seattle, I think, have kind of gone away a little bit. He's not able to really attack the middle of the field like he ever was, but he's not able to be an escape artist and really kind of get out of pressure. His athleticism really isn't, one of the best in the NFL like it was in Seattle, and I do think that costs him. He's not able to extend plays, keeps his eyes downfield, and rocket it downfield for one of his signature moon balls. I think losing Tim Patrick was a huge loss for him. Cortland Sutton hasn't been consistent enough as a contested wide receiver. I just think that Russell Wilson shows that once again, he's just not the same player that he once was. I think Sean Payton will instill a culture that really is going to turn the Broncos around, but I don't think he can fix Russell Wilson, and I do think that shows in 2023. And then finally, I think the Las Vegas Raiders, Aiden O'Connell comes in after a Jimmy G injury and plays pretty well to the point that perhaps, Josh McDaniels is still there. It creates a quarterback controversy like it did in San Francisco when they had Brock Purdy, Trey Lance, Jimmy Garoppolo. I think Garoppolo may be replaced once again, and it might be Aiden O'Connell, another late-round pick, just like Brock Purdy, that is able to unseat him after coming in due to injury. I think he could be a really interesting piece for the Raiders moving forward, and he may create some quarterback controversy in 2024 and moving forward. That's going to do it for my hot takes and bold predictions for the 2023 NFL season. What did I get wrong? What are your hot takes for the 2023 NFL season? Who do you think is going to be great? Who do you think is going to break out? Who do you think is going to have a terrible year? Let me know in the comments down below. If you like this kind of content, please hit that subscribe button down below. So close to 1,000 subscribers, and would truly appreciate your support in getting there. While you're down there, please hit that like button as well. It really helps push this video out to other fans just like you. Thank you so much for watching. I will catch you in the next one.